The alarm at observation station Neptune 7 was never supposed to sound. In 17 years orbiting beyond the solar system's last gas giant, the sensors had only detected stray comets and occasional bursts of cosmic radiation. But now, at 00347 Universal Time, every screen in the control room flashed crimson red. Commander John Miller dropped his fifth cup of early morning coffee and sprinted to the main console. His eyes scanned the data, refusing to believe what they saw. "Sarah, confirm the warp drive sensors," he ordered, his voice maintaining the trained calm of 2 decades in the Unified Defense Force. "This can't be right." Engineer Sarah Chen, a 42-year-old woman whose fingers danced over holograms with surgical precision, didn't look away from her station. "Confirmed, Commander. Mass warp anomalies. Coordinates beyond Neptune, Sector 7 Alpha. Distance 300 million kilometers and closing." "How many signatures?" Silence. Sarah checked again, her wide eyes reflecting the bluish light of the monitors. "Sir, 9,900 distinct signatures. Classification, large-scale vessels, all entering real space simultaneously." Miller's stomach plummeted. For decades, humanity had listened to the cosmos, hoping for a signal, any proof they weren't alone. The SETI program had evolved into a network of quantum sensors spread across the solar system, and now, finally, first contact, but not as friends. "Maximum alert," Miller commanded, activating the emergency communication protocol. "Transmit to Central Earth, Lunar Command, and all stations. Use Omega-level encryption. We have company." Through the station's observation windows, the black vacuum of space began to glow, not with the soft light of distant stars, but with vibrant purple tears in reality itself, rifts in the spatial fabric that pulsed like open wounds in the cosmos. From each tear, shapes emerged that defied initial comprehension. Ships, thousands of them. The hulls didn't reflect light like terrestrial metal. They seemed to absorb the surrounding darkness as if sculpted from the starlight night itself. Some were the size of aircraft carriers, others rivaled small moons. Impossible geometric formations rotated in perfect synchronicity, a display of coordination that would make any human admiral sweat cold. At the center of the fleet, one vessel stood out. It was a structure 10 kilometers long, with spines that radiated dark blue energy. The mothership. Miller had studied enough space warfare theory to recognize a command vessel when he saw one. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission." Communications specialist, Marcus Webb's voice, trembled slightly. "Broadband. All frequencies. It's universal. They want the entire planet to hear." "Route it to the speakers." For a moment, only static filled the room. Then, a voice echoed. It wasn't human. The vocal cords behind that sound were never designed to speak Earth languages, but the universal translator embedded in the transmission did its job with clinical efficiency. "Inhabitants of the third planet of this star. I am Supreme Commander Keztharik of the Galactic Coalition of the 100 Suns. You have been evaluated and deemed primitive. Your electromagnetic transmissions, your pathetic probes, your childish efforts to reach the void have marked you as a species in early development." Miller clenched his fists. The arrogance in the alien voice was palpable, even through the mechanical translation. "Your civilization achieved atomic division less than 2 of your centuries ago. Your nuclear weapons are toys compared to our technology. Our shields can withstand the heat of young stars. Your ships have barely left your home system. You are weak. You are irrelevant." Sarah looked at Miller, her eyes asking permission to do something, anything. He shook his head, negatively. "Not yet. But the coalition is generous." The voice continued. "We offer surrender, 1 full rotation of your planet, 24 of your hours. Transmit your total submission, and you will be integrated as a worker species. Your cities will be preserved as production centers. Your lives will continue under our administration." A pause. When the voice returned, all trace of false generosity had vanished. "Refuse, and annihilation will be total. There is no third option. There is no negotiation. You have 24 hours. Choose wisely." The transmission cut out, leaving only the low hum of the station's systems. "Commander," Sarah broke the silence, her voice carefully controlled. "Orders." Miller looked out the observation window, seeing the alien fleet position itself in a siege formation around the solar system. 9,900 ships against a planet that barely had 200 combat-worthy spacecraft. The odds were absurd. Any reasonable strategist would recommend surrender. But John Miller had studied history. He had read about Thermopylae, about Stalingrad, about every moment where human beings looked at impossible odds and said, no. "Sarah, open a secure channel to Central Earth. Access code Lazarus Alpha 00. The engineer blinked, surprised. "Sir, that code is... I didn't even know it was real. I thought it was an Academy urban legend." "I thought so too," Miller admitted, a grim smile crossing his face. "Until my promotion to Outer Command. Open the channel." The main screen flickered, replacing the tracking data with the image of a cavernous war room deep beneath Geneva. In the center, a 60-year-old woman, grey hair pulled back in an impeccable bun, eyes that had witnessed 3 world wars and the forced unification that followed. Governor General Catherine Ross of Unified Earth, the woman who had transformed a divided planet into a single force after the climate collapse of 2048. "Commander Miller," she said, her voice firm as forged steel. "I presume you received the ultimatum?" "Yes, ma'am. And their fleet is real. Sensors confirm 9,900 hostile vessels. They are in siege position." "Understood." Ross turned to someone off-camera. "Admiral Chen, activate Protocol Lazarus, all phases, yes, including the lunar facilities." Miller felt his pulse quicken. "Ma'am, Project Lazarus is real? I thought it was a story to scare cadets?" Ross allowed herself a cold smile. "Oh, it's real, Commander. Very real. Since 1947, since an unintentional visitor crashed in a New Mexico desert, we knew we weren't alone. And we knew that when they came, it wouldn't be as friends." 78 years, Miller whispered. "You prepared for 78 years. Every military bunker built, every lunar base secretly excavated, every advance in quantum physics that was marked classified, every orbital defense satellite the population thought was for asteroids. Everything was for this day." Ross leaned forward, her eyes burning with steely determination. "Humanity may be young, Commander, but young doesn't mean stupid, and it certainly doesn't mean weak." On the screen, Miller saw something move in the background of the war room. Technicians running, panels lighting up, an entire installation awakening from decades of forced hibernation. "Commander Miller, maintain vigilance. Do not initiate hostilities. Let them think we are panicking. Let them believe we are primitive." Ross smiled, and there was something predatory in that expression. "When they attack, and they will attack, Because arrogance always attacks, we will show the galaxy something no other species has ever seen. What, ma'am? Humans fighting for their home. The transmission cut out. Sarah looked at Miller, her eyes shining with something between fear and hope. Commander, what do we do now? Miller turned back to the window, watching the alien fleet glow against the vacuum like a necklace of poisonous pearls. 24 hours. One day for humanity to show who they really were. Now, he said calmly, we wait. And when they learn the most important lesson about our species, it will be too late to retreat. What lesson, sir? Miller picked up his coffee cup, still warm, and took a long sip. That underestimating human beings is always a fatal mistake. In the depths of the moon, magnetic cannons that had slept for decades began to awaken. 18 hours after the ultimatum, Earth was silent. Not the silence of panic, as Supreme Commander Kezatharik expected. There were no frantic transmissions, no desperate pleas for mercy, no communication between their primitive space stations, just absolute radio silence. From the command deck of his flagship, the star Nightmare, Kezatharik observed the blue planet through sensors that could detect the thermal signature of a single organism millions of miles away. His crystallized silicon skin reflected the soft light of the tactical holograms, each hardened plate displaying marks from 247 previous conquests. Status of the primary planet. His voice echoed like stones rolling in a deep cave. Sub-Commander Vrel, an insectoid creature with a chitinous exoskeleton, manipulated controls with 4 of his 6 claws. Commander, we detect minimal activity. Civilian transmissions continue normally. Their primitive communication networks are functioning, but no response to the ultimatum. Interpretation? Paralysis by fear, sir. It is standard behavior in Class 4 species when confronted with superior force. We expect submission within the next 6 hours, when they fully comprehend the futility of resistance. Kezatharik analyzed the tactical data. The human solar system was pathetic in defensive terms. A few antiquated orbital satellites, 2 space stations that barely qualified as habitable, a rudimentary lunar base that sensors showed to be in minimal operation. No orbital defense network worthy of the name, no space minefield, no interception fleet. It was almost disappointing. Commander, Vrel interrupted his thoughts. We detect a strange pattern. Their lunar base is consuming energy. Elaborate. 3 hours ago, the facility operated in minimal maintenance mode. Now the energy signature has increased by 700%. It's as if they are activating dormant systems. Kezatharik allowed himself a grave laugh. Preparing a last defense, no doubt. Touching. Send Vanguard Squadron Alpha, 400 ships, show of force over the lunar base. Let them see what happens when primitives play war. Immediately, sir. Through the panoramic observation window, Kezatharik watched 400 warships break away from the main formation. Each was 50 meters long, built with alloys that could withstand conventional nuclear weapons. Their plasma shields could deflect asteroids. They were only a fraction of his total force, but more than enough to crush any planetary resistance. The ships accelerated in a spear formation, crossing the space between Neptune and the Moon in minutes with antimatter propulsion. On the command deck of the star Nightmare, holograms showed the ship's trajectories, predicting arrival in lunar orbit in 120 seconds. 90 seconds until contact, 60 seconds. The moon's surface looked inert, ancient craters reflecting sunlight as they always had for billions of years. The small dome of the human base, Armstrong facility, glowed faintly with navigation lights, 30 seconds. "Sir," Vrel sounded confused, "I am detecting openings on the lunar surface, multiple positions. They appear to be doors, but maps show only natural terrain at those coordinates." "Visual images," Kesatharik ordered. The main screen zoomed in. What appeared to be lunar soil began to move. No, it wasn't moving, it was opening. Camouflaged panels, indistinguishable from the natural surface, slid aside, revealing black, abyssal openings. From each opening, something emerged. Cannons. Hundreds of them. Not the primitive chemical weapons Kesatharik expected. They were massive magnetic structures, each 300 meters long, glowing with contained energy. Electromagnetic coils lit up in sequence, creating visible magnetic fields that distorted the surrounding light. "Railguns," Vrel whispered, disbelief permeating his voice. "Commander, these are magnetic acceleration cannons on a planetary scale. The energy levels are... This is Class 2 technology. They shouldn't have this." Kesatharik rose from his command seat, all the plates of his skin vibrating at an alert frequency. "Evasive maneuver. All Vanguard ships, maximum dispersion pattern." Too late, the moon opened fire. There was no sound in the vacuum, but the flagship's sensors registered every shot. Reinforced tungsten projectiles, each weighing 3 tons, accelerated to 8% of the speed of light. At that velocity, each projectile carried kinetic energy equivalent to several nuclear weapons. The first 23 impacts occurred in 1.4 seconds. Vanguard ships simply disintegrated. There were no dramatic explosions. There was no time for it. Shields designed to withstand nuclear bombs were pierced like wet paper. The ultra-resistant alloy hulls vaporized on impact. Crews of 200 soldiers each ceased to exist before their nervous systems could register danger. "Evasive!" Vrel screamed frantic orders to the remaining squadrons. The ships tried to maneuver, but the volume of fire was impossible. Each lunar railgun fired in coordinated sequence, predicting escape routes with computational precision. The human targeting systems were not random. They were calculated by artificial intelligences that had been trained in space combat simulations for decades. 47 more ships were destroyed in the next 8 seconds. "Countermeasures. Activate sensor jamming," Kesatharik ordered, his voice losing for the first time in centuries its absolute confidence. But the humans weren't just using conventional targeting systems. The railguns were linked to a network of optical telescopes, quantum radars, and gravitational sensors. Even with electronic interference, the projectiles continued to find targets. Then, something worse happened. Gravitational anomalies detected. Vrel practically shrieked. "Multiple signatures. This cannot be real. They don't have this technology." In the vacuum between the moon and the Vanguard ships, small singularities began to form. They were not natural. They were artificially generated by missile-sized devices that emerged from hidden launchers on the lunar surface. Micro-black holes. Each existing for only milliseconds, but long enough. Physics didn't care about plasma shields or reinforced hulls. Extreme gravity simply pulled everything in. 3 ships were caught in the event horizon of a singularity. Their structures stretched and compacted into thin spaghetti before disappearing completely. In 90 seconds, 400 ships became 217. Retreat, Kezatharik finally ordered. All remaining ships returned to the main formation. The surviving ships turned, their antimatter engines roaring at full power as they fled the killer moon. The railguns continued firing, destroying 13 more ships during the withdrawal. When the survivors finally reached the relative safety of the main fleet, only 186 of the original 400 ships remained intact. 214 ships, over 40,000 coalition soldiers, had been eliminated in less than 3 minutes. On the command deck of the Star Nightmare, absolute silence reigned. "Intelligence report," Kezatharik said, his voice controlled, but with a tone his crew had never heard before. Fear. Rel manipulated controls with trembling claws. "Commander, complete re-evaluation needed. The lunar base is not just a research facility. It is a military fortress. Our sensors now detect underground installations extending for miles, camouflaged until activation. The humans, they tricked us. Technology analysis. The magnetic acceleration weapons are equivalent to our first-line weapons. The singularity devices are more advanced than ours. Commander, they are not primitive, not in the sense we believed." Kezatharik looked at the blue planet, his veteran conqueror's mind re-evaluating everything. 247 conquests. He had never encountered serious resistance. He had never lost even a quarter of an attack force in a single battle. And these humans had destroyed half of his vanguard in 3 minutes. "Strategic options," he demanded. "We could retreat, sir. Re-evaluate. Return with greater force." Kezatharik felt anger burn through the fear. Retreat. He, who had broken 1,000-year-old civilizations, humiliated by monkeys who had barely left their own planet. No, never. He turned to Vrel, skin plates vibrating with determination. "Mobilize the complete fleet, all 9,000 ships. Preparation for total planetary assault. If the humans want to fight, we will give them a war their species will never forget." "Sir, with all due respect, perhaps we should execute orders. Now." Vrel bowed in submission. "As you command, Supreme Commander." As the fleet began to reorganize for total assault, Kezatharik watched the moon, where railguns returned to hidden positions, ready for the next round. He had underestimated the humans. That mistake had cost 200 ships. He would not make that mistake again. What Kezatharik didn't know, what no member of the coalition could know, was that the moon was only the first line of defense, and humanity was just beginning to show its teeth. Kezatharik's decision to launch a total assault came 12 hours after the lunar disaster. 9,000 remaining ships positioned themselves in Earth orbit, a wall of metal and technology that blocked the starlight. In any other conquered world, the sight would have broken any spirit of resistance, but Earth did not transmit surrender. Instead, the response came in the form of a single text message, transmitted on all frequencies. "You were warned." Kezatharik ordered the orbital bombardment. 2,000 ships aimed plasma cannons at the surface, ready to vitrify entire continents. But when they fired, something impossible happened. The energy beams simply disappeared. "Report!" Kezatharik roared. Vrel worked frantically at his console. "Sir, there is a planetary defense field, not a conventional shield. It's dispersing our energy, redirecting it into empty space. The technology is unknown. Impossible. Full planetary fields require generators the size of mountains, detecting energy signatures at the North and South Poles, and at the equator. Sir, there are massive installations. They were invisible to our scans. Admiral Sarah Chen, now commanding terrestrial defense operations from a bunker 3 miles beneath Cheyenne Mountain, allowed herself a brief smile. Dispersion matrix functioning as planned, she reported to Governor Ross. Technology adapted from the thrusters of the ship, captured in 1947. They can bombard all they want. The energy will just be redirected into interstellar space. How long can we maintain it? Ross asked. Indefinitely, if they keep using plasma. But if they attempt kinetic bombardment, high-speed asteroids or debris, we'll need another strategy. As if listening, Kesatharik reached the same conclusion. Prepare landing capsules. If we cannot burn this world from orbit, we will take it sector by sector. Launch 2 million soldiers. Focus on population centers. The humans will surrender when they see their cities occupied. 3 million landing capsules were ejected simultaneously from the orbital fleet. Each contained 5 coalition soldiers, species from 20 different worlds, all armed with plasma rifles and combat exoskeletons that could crush reinforced concrete. The capsules entered the Earth's atmosphere like a rain of silver meteors. Thermal shields glowed red-hot, tearing through the air at supersonic speeds. Navigation systems calculated impact points: New York, São Paulo, Tokyo, Mumbai, Cairo, Sydney. Every major population center would be hit simultaneously. But when the first capsules reached 10,000 meters of altitude, something awakened. From the ground, from forests, from lakes and deserts, thousands of hidden launch platforms opened fire. They were not conventional missiles. They were autonomous drones the size of cars, each equipped with ion thrusters and precision explosive charges. The drones were fast, absurdly fast, and their targeting algorithms had been refined. Over decades of simulations, landing capsules began to explode in the air, not from direct impact, but because the drones detonated close enough for the shockwave to destroy navigation systems. Uncontrolled capsules crashed into oceans, mountains, uninhabited terrain. Only a fraction reached their intended targets, and those that did arrive found something worse than resistance. They found a living planet. In the Amazon rainforest, 500 capsules landed among the trees, creating craters and felling centuries-old vegetation. Coalition soldiers emerged, thermal sensors searching for hostiles. The forest was silent, humid, green. Then the trees attacked. Not real trees, but biomimetic. Drones indistinguishable from the vegetation. Built with carbon fibers and powered by solar batteries, they had been dormant in the forest for years, waiting. Now they activated. From seemingly natural branches, anesthetic dart launchers fired. The darts were specifically designed for alien physiologies, analyzed from DNA samples collected from the 1947 ship. Soldiers who were hit fell, not dead, but completely incapacitated, their nervous systems overloaded. In the Sahara Desert, another landing force encountered sandstorms that were not natural. Nanomachines dispersed in the air created directional winds, reducing visibility to zero. When soldiers tried to advance blindly, they sank into sand that had been turned into liquid by subsonic vibrations. In Tokyo, the civilian population had been evacuated to underground shelters weeks earlier. The streets were empty. But when alien soldiers marched through the city, the buildings themselves became weapons. Windows exploded outward, not from bombs, but from overloaded internal pressurization systems. Streets opened up, revealing pits filled with hardening foam that immobilized anything it touched. Sergeant Jake Morrison, leader of a human resistance unit in Sydney, watched through augmented reality binoculars as alien soldiers tried to navigate the city streets. "Activate Labyrinth Protocol," he ordered calmly. At his command, artificial intelligence systems began manipulating traffic lights, digital signs, and urban navigation systems. Alien soldiers followed routes that seemed logical, only to find themselves in dead ends. When they tried to backtrack, the routes had changed. The entire city became an impossible puzzle, designed to disorient and disperse invading forces. Back on the command deck of the Star Nightmare, Kesatharik watched reports arrive, each one worse than the last. 70% of landing forces are either incapacitated or isolated, Vrel reported, his voice cracking. "Commander, they have turned the entire planet into a trap. Every forest, every city, every terrain is hostile, and we are not just facing military personnel. The civilian population seems to be integrated into the defense." "They cannot have armed civilians," Kesatharik protested. "Primitive civilizations do not have that cohesion." "Sir, we are intercepting communications. Humans see no distinction between military and civilian in this situation. Every citizen is part of the defense network. Elderly people operating drones, children in shelters controlling disinformation systems, scientists reprogramming our captured technology. They fight as a single organism." Kesatharik felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: doubt. In 247 conquests, he had faced military empires, warrior societies, aggressive civilizations. But there was always a military elite separate from the population. There were always divisions that could be exploited. But the humans? Every single one of them fought, not because they were forced, but because they chose to. The very idea was alien to him. "Options?" he asked, hating the tone of uncertainty in his own voice. "We can withdraw ground forces and attempt a prolonged siege, cut off supplies, force surrender by deprivation." "How long?" "Years, sir. Humans have underground agriculture, nuclear fusion for energy, closed recycling systems. They prepared for long-term siege." Kesatharik looked at the blue planet below. He had started the day expecting a simple conquest, another trophy for his collection, another world for the glory of the coalition. Now he was trapped in a tactical nightmare where every decision led to more losses. "Commander," Vrel interrupted his thoughts, detecting unusual movement. "The terrestrial fleet is mobilizing." "What fleet? They barely have spaceships." "Sir, they are emerging from hidden installations on the far side of the moon. 62 ships, unknown designs, energy signatures. Commander, they are equivalent to our first-line vessels." Kesatharik felt his skin plates cool. The humans had hidden an entire fleet. "Tactical analysis. 62 ships against our 9,000 remaining. Mathematically, they have no chance." "But sir..." "But what?" "They are attacking anyway." Through the observation window, Kesatharik saw the human ships accelerate from the moon toward the coalition fleet. They were smaller than his warships, aerodynamic designs that suggested speed over heavy armament. But they moved with impossible precision, perfect formations that shifted in microseconds. "All ships, defensive positions," Kesatharik ordered. "Focus fire on the human ships. Don't let any escape." But as 9,000 ships turned their cannons toward the 62 human vessels, something happened that would change the course of the battle. The human ships did not try to bombard the fleet. Instead, they launched something small, too fast for precise tracking. Singularity torpedoes, hundreds of them, and each one sought not ship hulls, but something much more vital: antimatter engines. The first detonations began in the rear ranks of Kesatharic's fleet, where support ships maintained position. Micro-black holes formed directly inside engine chambers, and the result was catastrophic. Antimatter containment failed. Chain reactions exploded through dozens of ships simultaneously. There was no fire in the vacuum, only the cold, white light of antimatter annihilating matter in explosions that rivaled small stars. In 30 seconds, 200 coalition ships simply ceased to exist, and the human ships, agile and deadly, continued dancing among the wreckage, launching more torpedoes. Kesatharik realized with growing horror that he had made the mistake that ended empires. He had assumed victory was inevitable. The humans apparently disagreed. Captain Elena Vasquez never imagined she would be fixing an alien ship using high-strength duct tape and a multi-tool. But there she was, in the hangar of Armstrong Lunar Base, looking at the Coalition reconnaissance ship they had captured intact 3 hours earlier. "Report. Captain," Admiral Chen called over the communicator. "Admiral, the good news is the ship is operational. The bad news is I literally used carbon tape to reconnect an alien navigation system to a human computer." Elena gave a humorless laugh. "The Academy manual definitely didn't cover this." "Is the tape working?" "Surprisingly, yes. Dr. Kobayashi says the aliens over-engineered everything. Their systems have triple redundancy. We just need to trick the security protocols into accepting human commands." "How long?" 2 more hours. Maybe 3 if the language interface decides to have an opinion." "You have 90 minutes, Chen said, her voice firm, but not unkind. "Kesatharik is regrouping the fleet. If we are going to infiltrate his flagship, it needs to be now while he's distracted by our combat ships." Eleanor looked at the captured ship. It was alienly beautiful, all impossible angles and metal that seemed to absorb light. Inside it, 3 Coalition members were contained in a medical stasis cells, unharmed but unconscious. Humans didn't kill prisoners, never killed, but they would definitely use captured technology. "Understood, Admiral. 90 minutes. Elena disconnected and turned to her team. Dr. Hiroshi Kobayashi, a xenolinguistics specialist who had spent the last 40 years studying fragments of the 1947 ship. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the same communications specialist from Neptune 7, now transferred to Special Operations, and Sergeant Jake Morrison, newly arrived from Sydney after successfully coordinating urban defense. "All right, people," Elena began, "we have an hour and a half to make this alien junk obey us. Kobayashi, status of the control interface?" The doctor, a 73-year-old man whose eyes still shone with youthful scientific curiosity, adjusted his augmented reality glasses. "Fascinating, actually. Their operating system uses quantum logic, but the basic principles are surprisingly similar to ours. It's as if all technological civilization converges on similar solutions. Physics is physics, after all." "Doctor, in practical terms?" "Oh, yes. Sorry, I can make it work, but it will be an epic hack. I'm literally translating alien code into Python and then tricking the system into accepting that Python is a valid language. Marcus Webb let out a laugh. We're hacking an alien ship with terrestrial programming code. That is simultaneously the dumbest and most human thing I've ever heard. Welcome to Project Lazarus, Eleanor murmured. 70 years of preparation, and we're still improvising. Jake Morrison, who had spent the last few days coordinating combat drones against invaders, looked at the ship with professional skepticism. Captain, assuming we get this thing flying, what exactly is the plan? We are 4 people. Their flagship has thousands of crew members. That's why we're going to use the most human advantage we have, Elena said, a predatory smile crossing her face. Absolute creativity and total lack of shame. She activated a hologram showing the structure of the Star Nightmare, reconstructed from scans. Kesatharic's flagship is huge, 10 kilometers long. But like any large structure, it has weak points. Ventilation, energy conduits, maintenance systems. We're entering through the ventilation ducts, Marcus said, incredulous. You're kidding. I never kid about strategy, Elena replied. But yes, we are literally doing the most sci-fi cliché tactic because, apparently, super advanced aliens also need air circulation. Kobayashi chuckled, a surprisingly young sound. You know, I spent decades studying alien cultures in theory, and now we're going to invade a ship using a tactics I saw in old movies. Life is strange. Life is human, Elena corrected. And that's what gives us the advantage. They think in terms of formal military protocols. We think in terms of what would work in an action movie. And surprisingly, that's effective. The next 90 minutes were a controlled chaos of improvised engineering. Kobayashi soldered human circuits into alien interfaces. Webb hacked communication systems to respond with correct friend or foe codes. Morrison installed human combat gear in alien cargo compartments, and Elena supervised everything, drinking coffee that would be considered lethal poison to half the known species in the galaxy. Caffeine, she muttered, taking another sip. I bet they didn't expect our favorite beverage would be a stimulant capable of killing most alien life forms. Captain, Webb called from the ship's cockpit. You need to see this. Elena entered the command cabin. The controls were incomprehensible, a mix of floating holograms and tactile interfaces that responded to 6 fingers instead of 5. But Kobayashi had installed a human overlay, English text appearing over the alien symbols. We did it, Webb said, touching a panel. The ship responded, propulsion systems humming to life. It accepts human commands. The hack worked. I never doubted it, Elena lied shamelessly. Kobayashi, how's our transponder camouflage? Functional. To any coalition scanner, we look like a Class Delta reconnaissance ship returning from patrol. Until they look too closely. Then we won't let them look closely, Elena decided. Morrison, infiltration gear ready. Jake checked his backpack, filled with devices that would make pre-space age intelligence agents weep with envy. Insect-sized drones, precision explosive charges, a quantum hacking device that Kobayashi had literally invented that morning. As ready as I'll ever be to invade an alien ship, Jake replied. Great, because we're going to do exactly that. Elena sat in the command chair, her fingers hovering over controls she didn't even know how to name 60 minutes ago. Mission Control, this is Infiltration Team. We are ready for launch. Admiral Chen's voice echoed over the communicator. Infiltration Team, you are cleared for takeoff. May luck be with you, and Captain Vasquez? Yes, Admiral. Bring our people back alive. That is an order. Understood, ma'am. The alien ship, now half-human thanks to the most improbable hack in military history, lifted from the lunar hangar. Its thrusters, designed to run on antimatter, had been adapted to accept human fusion fuel. It wasn't efficient, it was dangerous, it was absolutely not recommended by any engineering manual. It was perfectly human. As they accelerated toward the Coalition fleet, Elena watched the ongoing space battle. The 62 human combat ships danced among thousands of enemy vessels, their pilots performing maneuvers that defied G-force limits only because medical exoskeletons allowed human bodies to withstand the impossible. You know, Kobayashi said, watching the same scene, there's a theory in xenobiology that humans are abnormally tolerant of acceleration and physical trauma. Our evolution, on a planet of moderate gravity, dense atmosphere, and constant predators, made us absurdly resilient. Are we literally the space orcs of the galaxy? Marcus asked. For lack of a better term, yes. Our endurance, our ability to consume toxins like caffeine, our tendency to befriend deadly predators and call them pets. We are strange, galactically speaking. Good, Elena said, navigating the ship through the battlefield. Strange is exactly what we need to win. The captured reconnaissance ship approached the outer perimeter of Kesatharic's fleet. Coalition scanners illuminated it, checking transponder and identification codes. The codes Kobayashi had hacked responded perfectly. Defensive gates opened. We're inside, Elena whispered, barely believing it. Next challenge. Webb pointed to sensors showing the flagship. Docking. We need to park this thing without raising suspicion. Leave it to me, Jake said, taking navigation controls with confidence born of 1,000 hours in simulators. I learned to fly watching space racing videos. How hard can it be? Please never say that again, Elena pleaded. But Jake guided the ship with surprising precision, following docking protocols provided by the onboard computer. The flagship grew in the observation window, a structure so massive it had its own detectable gravity. Moment of truth. The ship connected to the docking port with a soft, metallic click. Success, Marcus announced, checking external sensors. No alarms? They believe we are who we say we are? Elena felt pure adrenaline coursing through her veins. Phase 1 complete. Now comes the really hard part. Invading the ship? Jake asked. No, Elena corrected, checking equipment one last time. Convincing an entire galactic civilization that humans are not victims. We are predators, and we just entered their territory. She looked at her team. 4 humans against a ship of thousands. Math said impossible, but math never accounted for human stubbornness. Let's show the galaxy why you should never ever underestimate the species that domesticated wolves just because we thought they were cute. The docking door opened, revealing empty alien corridors. The infiltration had begun. The corridors of the Star Nightmare were made of light-absorbing material, creating a perpetual darkness, broken only by blue bioluminescent lines on the floor. Eleanor and her team moved in absolute silence, cushioned magnetic boots making them practically invisible to motion sensors. This is surreal, Marcus whispered on the internal communicator. We are literally walking inside an alien ship. Maintain focus, Elena replied, checking the holographic map Kobayashi had reconstructed. Ventilation ducts 30 meters ahead. That's our entry point to the ship's core. Jake Morrison stopped abruptly, raising a closed hand. Everyone froze. Footsteps. Not human. Something heavy was approaching down the perpendicular corridor. The team pressed against the wall, activating optical camouflage cloaks. The technology was half human, half adapted from alien fragments. It wasn't perfect, but in the low light, it would suffice. A 3-meter-tall creature passed, its shape vaguely resembling a vertical crustacean. Chitin plates covered a body that moved on 4 articulated legs. It carried something that looked like maintenance equipment. "Engineering worker," Kobayashi murmured, consulting the xenobiological database on his visor. "Kryn species, non-combatants, probably wouldn't even notice our presence." But Elena wasn't taking chances. They waited until the creature disappeared into the distance before continuing. The ventilation duct was exactly where Kobayashi predicted, covered by an alien metal grate that Marcus hacked open in 45 seconds. The opening was narrow, designed for species smaller than humans. "This is going to be uncomfortable," Jake observed, already squeezing inside. "Just remember," Eleanor said, following him, "ventilation on spaceships is sacred. They won't monitor it as carefully as other areas. It's our secret highway." The duct extended in 3 directions, illuminated only by the headlamps on their helmets. The air was sterile, processed by recycling systems that made oxygen breathable for dozens of different species. To the humans, it had a slightly metallic taste. Navigating to the command deck, Kobayashi instructed, consulting maps. 4 levels up, central sector. Distance, approximately 2 kilometers through these ducts. 2 kilometers crawling in absolute silence. Elena had trained for infiltration missions, but always in human structures. Here, every duct junction was designed for alien anatomies. Some sections were too wide, others painfully narrow, but they continued. After 40 minutes of claustrophobic navigation, they reached an observation grate that provided a view of what Kobayashi identified as the secondary command center. "Jackpot," Marcus whispered. The center was vast, with 50-foot ceilings and workstations arranged in a circular configuration. Dozens of beings from various species operated consoles, each focused on different aspects of the ongoing battle. Massive holograms floated in the center, showing the human fleet still bravely holding out against impossible odds. And at the heart of it all, on a raised platform, stood Kezatharik. Elena recognized the Supreme Commander from intelligence descriptions. Crystalline silicon skin reflecting holographic light, bone plates adorned with marks of conquest, eyes like cold embers, evaluating tactical data. He was alone, vulnerable. "We can take him now," Jake said, his hand moving instinctively toward the plasma weapon they carried. One precise shot through the grating, straight into his armor's power core. He'll drop before he knows what hit him. "No," Eleanor said firmly. "Killing leaders creates martyrs. We need something more definitive." "So what's the plan?" Marcus asked. Elena pointed to something she had noticed. A massive energy conduit running up the wall of the command center, pulsing with bright blue light. "That's the main power feed for the ship. Cut that, and the entire flagship goes dark. No power, no shields, no engines. It becomes a giant target for our fleet." "And how do we cut power on an alien system we barely understand?" Jake challenged. Kobayashi smiled, a grin. Eleanor had learned to associate with absolutely insane plans. "With this," he said, producing a device the size of a tennis ball. "Quantum virus. I programmed it to seek out energy management systems and overload them all simultaneously. You invented a computer virus for alien technology? Marcus said, clear admiration in his voice. In 4 hours. Well, I used code frameworks I developed over the last 4 decades studying the 1947 crash retrieval ship, so technically it was 40 years of work. Kobayashi corrected modestly. Elena took the device, feeling its light weight. How long after deployment until effect? 3 minutes. Enough. Time for us to retreat back to the ducks. What if we're detected? Then we improvise, like humans do best. Elena studied the command center. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Security systems constantly scanned. It was impossible to enter without being seen, unless they didn't try to enter the traditional way. See that maintenance panel? She pointed. Directly above the energy conduit. We can access it from above, through the ducts. Jake, you're the most precise. Can you make a drop-line shot, attach the virus, and reel it back in before an alarm sounds? Jake analyzed the angle, the distance, the obstacles. Technically, yes. Practically, maybe. With beginner's luck, definitely. Beginner's luck has never failed me, Elena decided. Let's do it. They navigated the ducts to a point directly above the target panel. Jake opened a small section of grating, just large enough to pass his equipment. From his belt, he pulled out a drop line with a magnetic tip. One shot, he muttered to himself. No pressure, just the fate of humanity riding on this throw. No pressure at all, Marcus agreed sarcastically. Jake took a deep breath, calculated the trajectory, and launched. The cable descended silently, the magnetic tip connecting to the panel with an almost inaudible click. Jake attached Kobayashi's quantum virus to the line and began carefully lowering it. 50 feet, 30 feet, 15 feet. A guard passed directly below. The device swung slightly in the ventilation breeze. The guard stopped. Eleanor held her breath. The alien creature looked up, multiple optical sensors scanning the darkness. For 5 seconds, that felt like an eternity. Everyone froze. Then, the guard continued its patrol, apparently deciding nothing was amiss. Proceed, Elena whispered. Jake lowered the device until it touched the access panel. With fingers that didn't tremble, despite the adrenaline, he activated the installation sequence. The virus began copying itself into the ship's systems, quantum code infiltrating the alien network like a digital parasite. Deployment complete, Kobayashi confirmed, monitoring progress on his tablet. 3 minutes until activation. I suggest we retreat quickly. Jake reeled in the cable with practice speed, and the team began moving back through the ducts. They reached the captured scout ship with 2 minutes and 40 seconds left on the clock. Everyone aboard, Elena ordered, sealing the hatch behind them. Marcus, prepare for emergency decoupling the moment power fails. Ready and waiting, Captain. 30 seconds. 20. 10. Elena watched through the observation window, seeing the Star Dreadnought flagship in all its menacing massiveness. Thousands of windows glowed with internal light. Engines pulsed with antimatter energy. It was a space fortress, seemingly invincible. 0. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if someone had flipped a cosmic switch, every light on the flagship went out simultaneously. Not just lights. Everything. Engines stopped. Shields collapsed. Life support systems shifted to emergency batteries. Communications died. The Star Dreadnought flagship of 247 conquests, commander of 9,000 warships, went completely dark in the vacuum of space and vulnerable. "Decoupling!" Marcus yelled, activating thrusters. The scout ship separated urgently as the docking systems failed. "Emergency transmission to Earth Command," Elena ordered. "Primary target neutralized. Repeat, primary target neutralized. All ships, concentrate fire on the enemy flagship. It is defenseless." Across space, the 62 human ships received the message. Pilots who had been in defensive combat for hours finally saw an opportunity. Singularity torpedoes launched en masse. Moonrail guns reoriented. Every human weapon focused on a single massive target, floating dark and silent against the stars. On the now darkened command deck of the Star Dreadnought, Kestharik finally understood the magnitude of his error. Underestimating humans was not just a tactical mistake, it was a fatal sin. "Abandoned ship," he roared in darkness illuminated only by faint emergency lights. "Everyone to escape pods, now!" But it was too late. The first torpedoes impacted the unprotected hull, and the flagship that had conquered worlds began to tear itself apart. The explosion of the Star Dreadnought flagship was not immediate. It was a slow, inexorable cascade of systemic failures. First, the antimatter chambers lost magnetic containment. Then, the backup fusion reactors overloaded. Finally, the entire 6-mile structure began to fragment. Pieces of alien metal drifting into the vacuum, while escape pods launched in all directions like dandelion seeds in the wind. Commander John Miller, still on Neptune 7, watched the real-time data, barely believing it. "Sarah, confirm. The enemy flagship is dead?" "Confirmed, Commander," Sarah Chen replied, her fingers flying over controls as she processed rivers of information. "No power, no shields, structure compromised by 78%. They are abandoning ship." "And the rest of the fleet?" "Complete chaos. Without the flagship, the chain of command has collapsed. Individual ships are making independent decisions. Some are trying to rescue survivors. Others are retreating." Miller felt something he didn't expect to feel. Not triumph, not joy, but a deep, exhausting relief. "How many enemy ships remain?" "Of the original 9,900, 3,400 are still operational. But, sir, they are not regrouping for attack. They are moving toward the system perimeter." "They're running," Miller said, almost not believing his own words. On the surface of Earth, in command, bunkers scattered across all continents, world leaders watched the same realization crystallize. The alien fleet, the impossible armada that should have crushed humanity in hours, was in full retreat. Governor General Catherine Ross allowed herself a moment of weakness, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. 78 years. 78 years since a ship crashed in the desert. 78 years of preparation, of secrets, of an entire civilization working in silence for a day they hoped would never come. And when it came, they were ready. "Status of our forces?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. Admiral Chen, her niece and orbital defense commander, responded via secure communicator. "Aunt Catherine. Sorry, Governor. Of the 62 combat ships, we lost 17. Rescue teams are recovering escape pods. Estimated casualties at 230 lives. Over 80% of ground defense forces intact. The planetary dispersion matrix is at 40% capacity but functional. We won." Ross heard her niece break on the last word. Decades of tension finally released. You did well, Sarah. You and every human who fought today. Now open a communication channel with the enemy fleet. It's time to talk. In space, Sub-Commander Vrel had assumed temporary command of the Coalition remnants. Kezatharik had survived the destruction of his ship, but was incapacitated by injuries. Leadership fell to Vrel, who never imagined being in this position. When the human transmission arrived, he almost ignored it. But curiosity, that universal characteristic of intelligent minds, won out. The holographic image that appeared was of an elderly human woman. Grey hair, eyes that had seen much. But they were not the eyes of a conqueror. They were the eyes of someone who had protected something precious and won. "I am Governor General Catherine Ross of the Unified Earth," she began, her voice clear and firm. "I speak on behalf of 8 billion human beings. Your invasion has failed. Your flagship has been destroyed. Your fleet is in disarray. You can continue this conflict, but I guarantee more. Lives will be lost on both sides, or you can choose survival." Vrel felt his chitinous claws tremble. "Survival? You offer us terms of surrender?" "No," Ross corrected, and there was steel in her voice. "I offer you the chance to leave. Take your remaining ships, take your wounded, take Kezatharik, and return to the Coalition with a message." "What message?" Ross leaned forward, and for the first time, Vrel saw not clemency, but absolute determination. That Earth is untouchable, that humans are not primitive, not weak, not victims. We are survivors. We are engineers. We are protectors of our home. And if the Coalition values its ships, never, ever try to invade this system again. And if we refuse, if we continue to fight, then you will discover that everything you have seen so far was restraint. Humans fought to defend. Imagine what we will do if we are forced to attack. Absolute silence filled the communication channel. Vrel had served in the Coalition for 40 cycles. He had seen Kezatharik conquer worlds with efficient brutality. He had never seen him lose. He had never imagined defeat. But looking at the wreckage of the fleet, at the fragmented flagship, at the blue planet that had revealed itself to be a predator disguised as prey, Vrel understood a fundamental truth. Some battles were not worth the cost of victory. "Transmit our intentions to your forces," Vrel finally said. "Complete withdrawal. No further hostilities. But no human that the Coalition does not forget." "Neither do we," Ross replied, "and that is why this lesson needs to be clear. Return to your worlds. Tell your story. Ensure every civilization in the galaxy understands humans protect what they love. And we love this small blue planet more than anything in the universe." The transmission cut. Over the next 12 hours, the Coalition fleet executed an organized retreat. 3,400 warships, what remained of 9,900, gathered survivors, performed emergency repairs, and began the jump sequence to hyperspace. The last ship to leave was a medical transport carrying Kezatharik. The Supreme Commander, awake but silent, watched Earth shrink in the observation window. 247 conquests, and now one defeat that would define the rest of his life. "Sir," a medic said hesitantly, "your injuries will heal. You will be fit for command again in 6 cycles." Kezatharik did not respond. Command? Who would follow a leader who had lost more than half a fleet against a planet he had classified as primitive? But more than his future, he thought about the lesson. Humans had prepared For generations, they had turned fear into strategy. They had used creativity where others would use brute force. They had fought not with hatred, but with the pure determination to protect their home. They were not primitive. They were something much, much more dangerous. They were born survivors. 3 years later, at the Galactic Coalition Assembly of the 100 Suns, a file was updated. Terran Solar System. Status: Class Omega Exclusion Zone. Reason: native population demonstrated unexpected military capability. Defense technology comparable to or superior to Standard Class 2. Prohibited any unauthorized contact. Prohibited any attempt at conquest or annexation. Penalty for violation: immediate expulsion from the Coalition. Vrel, now promoted by necessity to High Command after Keztharik's collapse, presented the final report. The terrestrial invasion was based on faulty intelligence, he told the Council of 200 Species. We presumed that primitive transmissions indicated primitive civilization. We did not consider that strategic silence could indicate preparation. We did not consider that a young species could be ingenious beyond our experience. Supreme Commander Keztharik paid the price of arrogance. A hissing voice from the Assembly commented. But the question remains. Are humans a threat? Vrel paused, considering carefully. No, humans are not a threat. They are different. They did not seek galactic conquest. They did not declare war. They simply defended themselves. But he looked at the Council, ensuring every member understood. If threatened, they will fight with a ferocity our coalition has never seen. I recommend we leave Earth alone, and that we learn the lesson that almost cost us our lives. What lesson? That underestimating a species based on age or apparent technology is always a fatal mistake. Humans may be young, but they are survivors, and survivors are more dangerous than conquerors. The file was approved. Earth became untouchable, and in the galaxy, a new expression began to circulate among intelligent species. Never provoke humans. They might seem friendly, but they are the only ones crazy enough to domesticate predators as pets, drink poison for pleasure, and fight against impossible odds just because they refuse to accept defeat. Back on Earth, life gradually returned to normal, or as close to normal as was possible after repelling an alien invasion. Project Lazarus was declassified, its technologies integrated into open society. Orbital defense ships stopped being secret. The planetary dispersion matrix became a World Heritage Site. But more important than technology was the shift in perspective. Governor Ross, in her final speech before retiring, summarized it perfectly. For decades, we prepared in secret, fearing this day, and when it came, we discovered something remarkable. Not that we were warriors, not that we were invincible, but that when humans unite, when we fight not for conquest but for protection, there is no force in the universe that can break us. We are small, we are young, but we are human. And that, my friends, is more than enough. Elena Vasquez, promoted to Admiral after the success of the infiltration mission, oversaw the construction of a permanent defense fleet. Not for conquest, just to ensure no civilization ever made Keztharik's mistake again. Jake Morrison became an instructor at the new Space Defense Academy, teaching young pilots that sometimes creativity and audacity beat superior firepower. Marcus Webb led the Xeno Intelligence Department, ensuring humans were never caught off guard again. And Dr. Kobayashi, at 76, finally published his masterpiece, Survival: Engineering How Duct Tape Saved Humanity. It became required reading in universities globally. On Neptune 7, Commander Miller often looked out into deep space, where the purple rifts had appeared years before, and thought about the journey, from terrifying discovery to improbable victory. "Sarah," he said one day, "do you think they'll come back?" Sarah Chen, now co-commander of the station, considered the question. "Honestly, no. We gave them every reason to leave us alone. What if another civilization tries? Then," Sarah smiled, "they'll learn the same lesson. That humans are the most stubborn, creative, and absolutely refusal-to-die species the galaxy has ever seen." Miller laughed. "You know, there's something poetically appropriate about that. We spent centuries looking for intelligent life. When we finally found it, they tried to conquer us, and they discovered that Earthlings don't die easily." "Nor should we," Sarah agreed. "This planet forged us in adversity. Deadly weather, fierce predators, diseases, wars, and we survived it all. Aliens were just another challenge." And maybe, Miller thought, maybe that was humanity's true strength. Not technology, not brute force, but the absolute refusal to accept defeat. The ability to look at impossible odds and say, "So what?" 10 years after the invasion, a signal arrived from a distant civilization. Not a threat, a request. "Earth, this is the Centauri Republic. We heard about your defense against the Coalition. We are facing our own threat. Could you teach us how to fight when everyone says we are too weak?" The human response was quick and clear. "Centauri Republic, welcome as allies. The first lesson of terrestrial survival, never let others define your strength. The second lesson, creativity beats pure power. The third lesson, fight for what you love, not for what you hate. Let's talk." And so began a new era, not of terrestrial conquest, but of humanity sharing the lesson they learned the hard way. That being underestimated is an advantage. That silent preparation beats noisy arrogance. That even the youngest species can teach the oldest. And that humans, these crazy primates from an insignificant blue planet, were exactly the kind of ally intelligent civilizations wanted by their side. Because when the galaxy learns not to underestimate you, when empires tremble at the sound of your name, when your reputation becomes your strongest shield, you have won more completely than any military conquest could achieve. You won without becoming what you fought against. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. End of story. If humanity's resilience inspired you, if the courage of team infiltration moved you, if you believe that even young civilizations can teach the galaxy valuable lessons, then join us on this journey through the stars. Subscribe for more Chronicles from the galactic frontier, where humans repeatedly prove that underestimating our species is always the biggest mistake any alien can make. Because in the vast universe of ancient civilizations and powerful empires, we are the rookies with something no one else has: absolute stubbornness, limitless creativity, and a categorical refusal to quit. See you among the stars, fellow humans.